Hi everyone, thank you so much first for taking the time to watch my video and possibly reading over my essay. It's been a lot of fun to work on, and so I'm excited to share what I have so far with all of you. It's not as far as I would like for it to be, as usual for this semester, but I wanted to go ahead and get it done so it can get reviewed, and hopefully I can get your input on it and make some changes on it before it's due on the 8th. So I am talking about the Astros and the Astrodome and the construction of the Astrodome and how it played into the peaceful desegregation of Houston. So this is a topic that is not really explored so far by historians. It originally got the idea from Dr. Littlejohn. I'm sure y'all know him. One of my classes, I don't even remember which one it was, but he assigned The Strange Demise of Jim Crow, and it was about the peaceful desegregation of Houston. And it's basically the reason that we don't hear a lot about it, and the reason that it went off without the massive rioting and violence that happened in a lot of the other southern cities and even in the northern cities as they worked to integrate facilities, is because they purposely left the newspapers out of it and the local media out of it. And the thought process was that if they didn't share, if people didn't know what was going on, then nobody had nobody would know to go out and to protest and to cause an issue with it. And so they made local businesses made deals with the student activists, the POA, and Eljury Stearns is one of the key people in my article, to allow them to do their sit-ins and to move in, and they just quietly integrated seemingly overnight over 70 businesses in downtown Houston. And a lot of this, where this comes in with the Astrodome, the big piece in this is that the MLB, meanwhile, Roy Hoffhines, who was a prominent businessman in Houston at the time, he was trying to get a Major League Baseball team into Houston and into the South, which was a big deal because they didn't have any teams in the South at the time. And so in 1960, when he's looking to acquire what would become the Houston Astros, he starts looking into one of the things that they really had a problem with was that they didn't want to bring in a team into a swamp city. I mean, y'all know how it is. Like, they were like, there's no way that we can have people attending these games in the heat and humidity with the mosquitoes. And so Roy Hoffhines had an answer for that, and that was the Astrodome, obviously. But that needed taxpayer support, and Hoffhines realized that in order to get enough votes to construct the Astrodome, which was the only way that they were going to get the MLB into Houston, was to secure black votes. And so he met up with Quentin Meese, who was a prominent activist in Houston at the time, and they had worked together. It's interesting because Hoffhines, even though it was this main push for the Astrodome, he had actually, as the mayor in the 1950s, he had already integrated the public libraries, a couple of golf courses, and so this was like, it was typical for him. It was part of his practice. It wasn't just like specifically a business strategy. So it was something that he had been kind of working on within the city for over a decade, and he knew Meese from when he was mayor and the judge, and he was working on all these things for the city of Houston. So they got together, and Meese was like, yeah, I'll support it, I'll lobby it with the black voters on the condition that the stadium is fully integrated and there's equal employment opportunities for the staff. And so Hoffhines was like, yeah, sure. That's what we've been working on anyways. And so that's how they moved into it. And that's how the MLB agreed to bring the only, at the time, Southern baseball team into Houston. And that's how we ended up with the Astrodome and the Astros, which I think is a pretty cool story. And one of the things, the Stearns with the sit-ins, he knew Meese from contacts because of the PYA, the organization that he had put together with law students at TSU. So he had put them together until he already knew them, and so they used Stearns to help go through the 3rd, 4th, and 5th wards of Houston, really trying to draw up votes for tax dollars to pay for the Astrodome's construction. So once that was done and they had successfully secured the bond, they started looking at the fact that when Black athletes came into Houston, they were going to need to be able to have places to eat. They're going to need to have places to sleep. They're going to need places to be entertained. And that means that those other places will also need to be integrated. And so they just quickly went in 1962 when they opened up it was actually like a stadium that Astrodome didn't get open until 1965, but they had like a I don't know, like an intermediate stadium. I can't think of the word for it. A temporary stadium for when they actually started playing as the Colt 45s in 1962. And it was then that all the businesses in the area, all the hotels started working towards, they were like, okay, so they just also desegregated overnight. They just took down their signs and started letting people in, which I think is pretty awesome. So one of the things that I do want to address in it that I haven't quite gotten to, but I left it in the bullet points, was I don't want it to come off as like a fairy tale, right? There was a lot of racial problems in Houston, just like every other city in the South. I mean, the KKK was on the rise. They had the 1917 riot. They had some issues at TSU in 1965 and in the 1966 and 1967. I think that I'm also going to discuss, along with Algery Stearns' accounts of some of his personal things that he went through as growing up in Galveston and in Houston. So it's important to acknowledge that, right? That it wasn't just like, oh, this is like the best land ever, even though I'm sure most Houstonians would agree it's pretty good, right? But so I just want to make sure that it's not coming off as a fairy tale, but the bottom line is that it went off a lot better than a lot of other cities did, and it was largely due to the efforts of these three men. And so I just kind of wanted to highlight that. So because it's not really talked about other than in the documentary, they talk about the Astrodome for like 10 seconds. Other than that, I've really had to rely on, as far as sources go, and because it was a news blackout, a media blackout at the time, I've had to rely on Misa's memoir. Hoffheinz has a biography that was written by one of his friends and fellow newscasters. And then Algery Stearns, it's actually kind of sad. He ended up having a lot of mental health issues. And so it's interesting because it's a biography, but it's written, it's not as a ghostwriter even, but historian Thomas R. Cole interviewed him and got his story down, and then wrote it for him. And so that's what I've relied primarily on. And then of course there's like articles throughout Houston, papers over time, and I found a lot of secondary articles about the Astrodome in general, and I've just kind of pieced them all together to create what I have so far. So this was a super long video. I feel like maybe you don't even have to read it now because you know what it's about. But thank you so much for watching. I really would love to have your input, maybe some things that like you feel like need to be added, or things that sometimes I feel like I'm explaining myself and I'm really not. And so please note that and let me know if there's something that isn't coming across the way I intended it to, or if maybe it needs more clarification or needs like a little bit of expansion. That would be awesome. So thanks so much. I'll talk to y'all soon. Bye.